Amityville Horror, The House on Ocean Avenue. Come closer, because this one has two stories, and the question of which one is true, or whether both can be simultaneously in ways that are not mutually exclusive, is something that investigators, theologians, and ordinary people who have driven slowly past 112 Ocean Avenue have been arguing about for nearly 50 years. One story is about a family that moved into a house. The other is about what the house did to them. Part 1. The House. Amityville is a small, quiet village on the south shore of Long Island, New York, the kind of place where the streets are lined with mature trees and the houses back onto canals that feed into the Great South Bay. In the autumn, it is genuinely beautiful. The water reflects the sky. The neighborhoods are orderly and well kept and carry the particular tranquility of places where nothing on the surface appears to be wrong. 112 Ocean Avenue is a large Dutch colonial house, 3 stories with a distinctive gambrel roof and 2 quarter-circle windows on the uppermost floor that, from certain angles and in certain lights, give the facade the appearance of a face looking outward. It was built in 1927. It has 6 bedrooms, a boathouse, and a swimming pool. In 1974, it was, by any reasonable measure, an attractive family home in a pleasant neighborhood on the Long Island waterfront. On the night of November 13, 1974, Ronald DeFeo Jr. moved through the house room by room with a .35 caliber Marlin rifle and shot 6 members of his family while they slept. His parents, his 2 brothers, his 2 sisters, all 6 were found face down in their beds. None of the neighbors reported hearing the shots. None of the victims appeared to have woken or attempted to flee. DeFeo was 23 years old. He was convicted of 6 counts of second-degree murder and sentenced to 6 consecutive terms of 25 years to life. At various points during and after his trial, he offered different explanations for what he had done. A hired killer, a moment of madness, voices in the house that told him his family was plotting against him. The explanations changed, the bodies did not. The house stood empty for 13 months. Then the Lutzes moved in. Part 2. The Family. George Lutz was 28 years old, a land surveyor, recently married to Kathleen, 26, who had 3 children from a previous marriage. Daniel, Christopher, and Missy, aged 9, 7, and 5, respectively. George and Kathleen were aware of what had happened in the house. They were told before they signed the papers. They decided, as young families sometimes do when the price is right and the square footage is generous, that the past was the past. They moved in on December 18, 1975. They left on January 14, 1976, 28 days. What the Lutzes described in the weeks and months after their departure, first to investigators, then to author Jay Anson, whose 1977 book would make the house one of the most famous addresses in America, was a catalog of experiences that began as unease and escalated across less than a month into something that drove a family of 5 out of a house they had purchased, leaving behind virtually all of their possessions in the middle of the night. George began waking at 3:15 every morning. The time, investigators would later note, that the DeFeo murders were estimated to have occurred. He stopped showering. He became withdrawn and cold, spending hours feeding a fire that never seemed to warm the house. Kathleen had vivid, violent dreams. Missy, the 5-year-old, developed what her parents described as an imaginary friend. A pig, she said, with red eyes, that she called Jody, that spoke to her and told her things. Doors and windows were wrenched from their hinges by forces the family could not identify. A green viscous substance seeped from the walls. Swarms of flies appeared in the dead of winter in a room that was sealed. A crucifix hanging in the house inverted itself repeatedly. Kathleen's face, George reported, transformed one night before his eyes into that of a very old woman. A priest came to bless the house. He reported hearing a voice tell him to get out. He developed unexplained blisters on his hands. He repeatedly attempted to warn the Lutzes and found, each time, that something prevented his calls from connecting. On the night of January 14th, George Lutz woke from a dream and told his wife they were leaving. They took the children and the dog and drove away. They did not go back. Part 3. The Investigation. What followed the publication of Jay Anson's book in 1977 was, depending on your perspective, either a serious paranormal investigation or a case study in the way that a story, once it achieves sufficient velocity, becomes impossible to stop regardless of what the evidence shows. The Warrens came, Ed and Lorraine Warren, the demonologist and the clairvoyant who had built a career investigating haunted houses, visited 112 Ocean Avenue and declared it one of the most genuinely infested locations they had ever encountered. Lorraine described feeling an overwhelming, malevolent presence. A photograph taken during their visit appeared to show a small boy with glowing eyes standing in one of the doorways. The boy was never identified. Other investigators were less persuaded. Dr. Stephen Kaplan, a parapsychologist who was initially engaged to study the case and then dismissed when he began asking questions the Lutzes found inconvenient, concluded after extensive research that the haunting was a fabrication. He published his findings in a book titled, with minimal ambiguity, The Amityville Horror Conspiracy. His central argument was simple. The timeline didn't hold. The specific details the Lutzes described could not be independently corroborated. Neighbors reported nothing unusual during the 28 days the family was in residence. The priest who blessed the house, Father Ralph Pecoraro, confirmed he had visited, but his account of what occurred there was significantly less dramatic than the version that appeared in print, and he spent years attempting, largely without success, to have his name removed from the story entirely. In 1979, William Weber, the attorney who had represented Ronald DeFeo Jr., gave an interview in which he stated that he had sat with George and Kathleen Lutz over several bottles of wine, and together they had constructed the story. His motivation, he suggested, was to create grounds for a DeFeo appeal. The Lutzes denied this. Weber was not a reliable narrator by any measure. He had his own reasons for saying what he said. And yet, the Lutzes never recanted. George Lutz, until his death in 2006, maintained that every detail of their account was true. Kathleen maintained it until her death in 2004. They passed polygraph examinations. They submitted to hypnotic regression. They gave hundreds of interviews across 30 years, and the essential architecture of their account remained consistent and unverifiable. Part 4. The Address. The families who have lived at 112 Ocean Avenue since the Lutzes departed have reported, almost uniformly, nothing unusual. The current owners have repeatedly requested privacy and expressed frustration at the tourism the house continues to generate. The quarter-circle windows, the eyes, were altered at some point, changing the roofline enough to make the house less immediately recognizable from the street. It didn't stop people driving past. Ronald DeFeo Jr. died in prison in March 2021. He had been there for 47 years. In his final years, he gave a series of interviews in which he told different stories, different enough that investigators and journalists who followed the case closely found them impossible to reconcile with each other or with what had been established at trial. He took whatever the true version was with him. The house in which he killed his family was sold and resold and renovated and continued to stand on its canal in Amityville, looking out at the water. Whether the Lutzes were lying or genuinely experienced something in those 28 days that neither the language of psychology nor the language of the supernatural has yet found adequate words for, is a question that the evidence, carefully examined, does not resolve. What it offers instead is this: 6 people died in that house, face down in their beds, without waking. A family moved in 13 months later and lasted 28 days. And whatever George Lutz woke from at 3:15 in the morning, night after night, in a house where the walls wept and the windows inverted themselves, and a 5-year-old girl spoke to a pig with red eyes about things her parents could not bring themselves to repeat, was either something that has no rational explanation, or it was nothing at all. And you must decide, alone in the dark, which of those two possibilities frightens you more. Sleep well, my friend.